Share my screen. First of all, it's really nice to get to be here with you all today. My name is Lizzy. I am the product manager for dashboards at Splunk. So that means both the Simplexml dashboards as well as the new Studio dashboards. I'm very excited to talk to you about what's in the new dashboards. What I figure we could do today is I'm going to spend maybe 10 minutes at most in the slides. I want to jump over to a quick demo and then spend the majority of the remaining time addressing any questions that you have, or if there's anything you want to see specifically, and I can show you that while we're kind of in our playground environment. So if that sounds good. What we'll walk through today is just a little context around why we made this investment into this new dashboarding framework and what are the goals that we were trying to accomplish with this new dashboarding framework. What are some of the key features since we just GA'd earlier this year. So what are some of the key features that are there? What are some of the things that we'll be working on and adding throughout the rest of the year? And then of course a demo. I am sure you are all very familiar with Simplexml and glass tables from ITSI. And in both of these frameworks, we know that there are a lot of really great strengths, but there are also some challenges in terms of being able to create really beautiful dashboards or dashboards that really communicate the story or the information you want to relay to, whomever is looking at the dashboard. So when we look at Simplexml, for example, there's a wide variety of visualizations. There is an entire library that you can pull from Splunk base. But because of the rigidity with the layout options, sometimes it's difficult to convey exactly what you want to. And so if you wanted to make any changes, like you want to add images, you want to change colors, you want to adjust the layout, you want to add text, it starts to require custom development in order to do so. Of course, that makes it a little more snowflakey and can break between upgrades. And then if you've ever tried to export it to PDF, well, you know that it's not great. With glass tables, we tried to address some of those things. So as you can see, right, there are support for text, images, kind of free placement of objects on the canvas. But this ends up usually being you have to click to drill down to something else, to drill down to something else, to drill down to something else. There's no export supported for like no PDF export that's supported. And so again, a lot of great strengths in trying to plug some of the requests that we've been hearing from Simplexml dashboards, but still not quite there yet. So we took a holistic look at these different visualization frameworks that we've had in Splunk to see what are the strengths that we want to make sure we're taking forward, and then where are the gaps that we know have been longstanding pain points that we want to address. So those are the things that we tried to accomplish with Studio. And when we think about the top level goals that we want to achieve is making it easier to be able to tell those stories with the data that's in your environment and make it easier to build those dashboards, right? There's no reason why if you want to change the colors on your column chart, you should need to use custom CSS, right? That we should be able to support that out of the box. One of the rules of thumb we like to think about is it possible for you to create a dashboard such that when you share it, someone else who's looking at it can get what's going on within the first 10 seconds of looking at the dashboard? Or do they need to actually read every panel and the title and description for every panel and maybe open it up in search to see how you structured the SPL to understand what's going on? Like, we don't want that to be the case. We want it to be really easy to look and see, like in this dashboard, for example, like, okay, I can see this is like bright red, so something's going on here. Like, we want it to be that easy to understand what's going on. So if we look at some of the key features, there are, of course, as I mentioned, it's still a dashboarding capability. So there are a lot of features that are going to be very similar to Simplexml. And then, of course, there are a lot of strengths in Simplexml that allow for very interactive dashboards. And we want to make sure that we're bringing all of those things over. So as far as the types of data and searches that you can use, it's same as Simplexml. You have inline searches, you can use safe searches or reports, and also base and post-process searches. We've just changed the name from post-process to chain, but the underlying mechanics are all the same. And we've also added UI so that it's a lot easier to create chain searches from other searches or safe searches that you have versus today in Simplexml, it's only available in source. With visualizations, we have all the same standard charts, so line, area, bar, so on and so forth. We have some additional visualizations that are not available in Simplexml that I'll talk about on the next slide. With inputs, we have time range picker, the selection list like multi-select and drop-down and text boxes. With tokens, actually for the next 2 bullet points, tokens and drill downs, these are areas where as of today, it's kind of basic functionality, but is actually our main focus this quarter is to improve that functionality. So for example, with tokens today, you can only set a token value from an input. But what we're working on this quarter is things like set a token upon page load, set a token from URL, be able to pass a token through a drill down. So like all those kinds of things that you're used to in Simplexml, we're working on adding this quarter. So similar story for drill down. Today, we only have drill down to like an explicit URL, but it is on our roadmap for this year to add other drill down actions like, drill down into a search or other actions like that. With Simplexml, you may recall that there is an app on Splunk Base for dashboard examples, and it kind of walks you through all the different visualization types and examples of complete dashboards. We've provided the same thing for Studio. One big change, though, is that we've made it available out of the box, so you don't need to download a separate app to get those examples. It'll be hosted from directly within the dashboard page, and I'll show you that in the demo. And then, of course, we have both the UI editor for adding visualizations and things like that to the canvas, but we also have a full source view. The main difference being that instead of Simplexml, we are now using JSON for our source code. And later, I'll talk about some of the things that using JSON and like some of the new structures that we have for how we structure the dashboard definition has changed, and some of the benefits for doing that. Things that are new specifically in Studio, and I know this is a lot to keep in mind, so we'll definitely take a look at all of it in the demo. More flexible layouts. So we have 2 layout options in Studio, the first being absolute. So think of that like a freeform canvas. You can put objects wherever you want on the dashboard. Grid layout is more akin to Simplexml, except you have more options for where you put the visualizations, and you can also resize them. So as you know, with Simplexml, as you move things around, it kind of automatically sizes and you're stuck with that size. So that's one improvement we've made with this grid layout option, so that you can have more flexibility, but it still does that automatic alignment and resizing without having to do like the pixel perfect control that is required in absolute layout. We also support more objects out of the box. So, and these are actually specific to absolute layout too, but support for images, icons, shapes, lines, text boxes. So these are all things that you have available and you can just add to the dashboard. And something that we are adding in the upcoming release is going to be a markdown visualization. So if you wanted to do some more advanced art, if you've had a chance to play with Studio or with the beta app, you'll know that the text box is pretty limited. You can only set one font size, one font weight. So you can't have just part of it bold, right? The whole thing will bold if you try to. So we are adding a markdown visualization in this upcoming release. On-demand export to PNG and PDF. So now if you try to download the dashboard, it will actually look like the dashboard and it won't decompose it the way that Simplexml does. We've also added support for something called dashboard defaults. So think of this like you have a bunch of searches on your dashboard and you want all of them to refresh every 1 minute. Rather than having to go to each individual search and set that setting to say, okay, I want search 1 to refresh every 60 seconds and search 2 to refresh every 60 seconds, we actually have a stanza within the source code called defaults, where you can just say, hey, for all data sources that are inline searches, I want them to refresh every 60 seconds, and then boom, it'll apply to everything else. The same thing works for visualization. So let's say you have a number of a color palette you want to use for all your visualizations. Rather than go to each visualization and manually adjust the colors for the series in those visualizations, we can go to the visualization section of the default stanza and just say, hey, I want all my pie charts to use these series colors, and boom, it'll apply to all pie charts. So you set it once and you don't have to worry about going back later if you make changes and making sure you update every single one. And then there's flexibility within that. You can always override that on like a specific visualization. If for some reason you have one pie chart that you don't want to be the same color as others for whatever reason, you can always override that, and a more local setting will always override the global setting. We also have support for Choropleth SVGs. If you're not familiar with these, SVGs are a visualization type that can dynamically respond to data. So I'm actually going to skip ahead to just a slide because we're not going to look at that in the demo today. But here's an example of an SVG. Actually, there's two here. One is the building plan here. The other one is the floor plan here. And what we've done is, as part of the SVG, we're able to provide boundaries for different areas of the SVG. So in this case, it's the different floors. In this case, it's the different rooms are all their own specified area of the SVG. And then we can tie these to a data source so that as the data is updating, it will update the SVG to change colors. In this case, we're looking at room capacity. And so as the numbers are updating here, the colors are updating as well in SVG. So just in another example of a new visualization we've added support for in Studio. Oh, and this is it. We're also going to look at absolute layout. So just to show you kind of what grid layout looks like. So you can see, similar to Simplexml, as you drag things around, it'll automatically kind of resize to fill the space and automatically align to the other panels around it. But you have a lot more flexibility to adjust the layout within that. So as you can see, I can have all different configurations where I have, in this case, two visualizations in this same broader row, and then I can adjust the sizes of that. And then just go back here. And then a couple of other things, just enhancements we've made, especially considering absolute layout, where you can have multiple objects that are all over the place. We made it a lot easier to edit those things. So some of the things that, if you ever used Google Slides, for example, you can multi-select objects on that slide and align them. Same thing. So common sense shortcuts like that are things that we're trying to make sure that we're making available. So as you're getting used to the new framework, there are a lot of things that are hopefully intuitive for you to use. With that, let me just skip forward real quick to my kind of roadmap, some of the things we're planning, and then we'll jump over to the demo. So as I mentioned earlier, some of the key things that we're working on this year are enhanced tokens and drill down support. So as I mentioned, things, basically the type of tokens capabilities and drill down actions that you have in Simplexml, we're working this year to make sure to add them to Studio as well. We'll be working on adding more UI controls for visualizations and configuring them. The reason I want to call this out in particular is one of the things that, as Splunk has been emphasizing kind of more of a cloud release cycle, one of the things that we've been doing as part of that is releasing more capabilities sooner, but that sometimes means that we're not able to get to everything that we wanted. So for example, we may add a visualization that has options to, change the color, but we may not have enough time to add it to the UI. So it may be something where you'll notice as you get up to speed on Studio, there are a handful of options that currently you can only set in source. It's not our intention to leave it that way. We plan to add UI for more or less everything so that you can do everything from Canvas, or especially as you're trying to enable other users in your organization who may not be as familiar with Splunk or be not as technical. That they'll be able to do everything that they need to, but we're not there yet. And as we're iteratively releasing new capabilities, we always start with releasing those new capabilities in source, and then incrementally adding UI on top of that. We're also adding more advanced visualizations, like conditional coloring for visualizations, and I'll show you what this looks like as part of the demo. We will be improving some of our dashboard management capabilities. So for example, if you have a Simplexml dashboard that you've already put a lot of time into those searches and those visualizations, making it easier for you to use that as a starting point by just converting it to a studio dashboard. And when I say converting, what I mean is we're actually making a copy of it and then converting the copy. That way the original dashboard that you have will remain untouched. If you ever need to refer back to it, you always can do so, but we're just making a copy and converting the copy in Studio so that your searches are already there. Most of the visualizations will already be there, but of course, anything that we don't support today won't make it over in the conversion process. But those are things that as we're adding new features and making Studio have better parity with Simplexml, that conversion will also increasingly be bringing over more and more of those features from Simplexml to the Studio dashboards. We continue to expand our dashboard default options. So I already talked about a couple of examples, like setting a refresh rate for all searches or setting the same color or other options for all visualizations. And then also we're working on scheduled email export for Studio dashboards as well. Any questions before I jump into the demo? I know I kind of flew through that pretty quickly. It's a lot of talking.
That's pretty good, and I was wondering about the conversion, and I'm glad to hear that it's going to be there. Is there going to be a kind of a compatibility checker saying, will this be convertible, or even some sort of kind of side-by-side? It's like, okay, this is supported, this is not supported to you.
Yeah, that's a really great question. That's one of the things that we're going to be working on this year to improve that. So what we have today, let me just actually show you. What we have today, and don't mind all these weird names. Obviously, this is one of our internal environments, but so let's say I open up a Simplexml dashboard. What's available today is this action to clone it in Studio. And so what happens today is it's just going to do its best to take everything that's here and dump it into Studio. What we want to do as part of one of the enhancements is exactly what you just asked, like make it easier for you to know what's going to convert, what's not going to convert, so that when you land in Studio, you know what things might need to be adjusted, or if maybe you have to pick a different visualization type for the time being. But otherwise, we do have in our documentation, we have a table that kind of compares what's available in each.
All right, cool. Yeah, it seems like it would be nice to have, some sort of checker saying, okay, this one can be converted, but this one can because it's not using those. Right.
Totally. So, totally agree.
Very cool.
Any other questions?
Hi, Lizzy. I have 2 questions. For updates to the Studio dashboard, I assume that these are all going to be rolled into Splunk Cloud updates. Is that going to happen automatically?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. And then my other question is, as far as things like custom visualizations, do you see those getting supported in this environment, or will there be the ability for the people who created those to then do the same thing in Studio dashboard?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So for custom visualizations, this is going to be kind of a long answer, so bear with me. One of the first priorities we have is any of the Splunk built custom visualizations. So like Sankey diagram, for example, we are going to be bringing into the Studio framework itself. So it'll be available out of the box. And then as far as third-party visualizations, custom visualizations, we do plan to provide support for it, but it's a bit of a longer term roadmap item for us, just because at this time, our priority is trying to close some of those parity gaps that we have with, the out of the box experience with Simplexml, but it is on our roadmap, and our team is thinking about still figuring out how we're going to structure that framework to support custom visualizations in Studio. So what I definitely will recommend is to go to our Splunk Ideas portal and make sure that you're submitting that idea and or upvoting it. I think there might be already an idea submitted, and just upvoting it. Those ideas we actually triage on a regular basis, and internally we have like SLAs for responding to and prioritizing the top voted ideas every quarter. And so I do highly encourage using Splunk Ideas to show, to help us gauge how much interest there is for it. And then in the short term, we do have the possibility of, if you're building a custom app, you can take the underlying framework, so not Studio itself, but the actual frame, like dashboard engine underneath it, and build whatever visualizations you want with that. So it's definitely a much heavier lift, but if there is a really pressing need for custom visualizations now, it is possible by doing that. And I'd be happy to share some resources for getting started with that. We don't have great developer documentation around it. It's another, yet another roadmap item, but we definitely have some resources and some examples that are publicly available on GitHub that I can share with you.
Okay, thanks for the info. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, Lizzy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Since you're on this screen that we're looking at now, wouldn't it be nice to have a last modified column?
You know, I actually have a ticket for that on the backlog. So it is planned.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Manny. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question. I believe I emailed you this. One of the things that I'm kind of missing is the lack of drill down in this framework. The only thing that you have right now, it is a URL, custom URL. You're missing like setting up tokens, and for me, tokens is very important. What's the time frame for bringing tokens, setting up tokens when with drill downs? You have guys anything in plan or?
Yes, that is our primary focus this quarter is token support.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'll start going into the demo, and then please feel free to interrupt me if you have questions on anything that I'm showing or any other questions that you have. What we're looking at right now is just search and reporting. And on the dashboards page, what you'll see is a couple of changes. In this rightmost column right now, we have both, you can see which dashboards are built in Studio and which are, classic Simplexml dashboards. Anytime you create a new dashboard now, you will need to select between whether you want to build Simplexml or Studio. So you absolutely have access to still build both. If you select Studio, as we were discussing before, there are 2 layout options to select from, so you can make your selection here. And then we've also added these little resource cards to the top of the page so that you can have quick links to both the documentation for Simplexml dashboards and for Studio dashboards, but also our examples hub. So if you click this, it'll launch you into a new tab that will take you to the examples hub. And so here you can see for any given visualization, you can click into them and they will have a bunch of different configuration options with the SPL that we used, as well as the actual source code for that visualization here. So as we're going down, so you can see all the different things that you can do, even emojis. And at the bottom of every page, or almost every page, there is this section called full source, where if you were to copy and paste this into your own dashboard, it would actually provide you this entire page. So each of these pages are actually dashboards themselves. There are, of course, for the different types of data sources we support. So inline searches, basin chain, safe searches are examples for that, examples for inputs and drill downs, examples for dashboard defaults. And then the one I really want to show is examples for complete dashboards. And we continue to add to this as we have new dashboard examples. And so even as you're building dashboards, if you have a really great dashboard that you think would really benefit others, you can let us know, and we would be more than happy to add that to our examples hub here. So for any one of these dashboards, you can click into it, you can view the dashboard. You can use this for both ideas and inspirations for your own dashboards, or even if you want to use it as a starting point for your own dashboard, you can come down here and again, copy and paste this full source code into your own dashboard, and then, replace the searches or replace the visualizations or whatever else you want to do. So now that I've covered those basics, let's take a look at a quick demo. I have a half-built dashboard here because I wanted to show how we can start how easy it is to start building and adding things. What we're looking at is a data center, and we're just collecting some key KPIs around power utilization, room temperature, things like that. When you want to add a new visualization, you'll use this top toolbar here. So all of the visualizations that we support are available here. Inputs that you want to add are available here. Icons, and you can upload your own icons as well. These are stored in the KV store. Shapes, images, text boxes, and then, so those are the things that you can add to the dashboard. This gear icon will toggle open or close the right side configuration panel. And so you can see, you know, we've set a background image. You can also change the display mode from being whatever the actual sizes that you've specified for the canvas height and width, or you can fit to width, which will dynamically, you know, expand the dashboard based on the monitor. And then things like, you know, showing and hiding the title and description. One of the other things that we're adding in the upcoming release is the ability to hide the edit button and hide the open and search button. And then in a future release, we'll also be adding the ability to hide the Splunk bar and the app bar here. So in case there's anything, any dashboards you don't want people poking around in. This next one is your data source manager. So this is one of the key things I wanted to talk about that's different in Studio than in Simplexml. In Studio, your data sources can live independently of the visualization or the input that they're tied to. So what that means is I can create a search here and have it listed in this list and not necessarily have it actually doing anything on the dashboard. Of course, there's not really a great reason for doing that. Where this really comes in handy is this means that you can tie multiple visualizations or inputs to a single data source. So that means if you wanted to show, you have the same data and you want to show both a table detailed view as well as, you know, a single value KPI for the latest value, you can do that with one search. And so especially if you're displaying a lot of things on your dashboard that have similar searches that you're using, you know, behind the scenes, you can reduce the amount of searches you're actually executing from the dashboard. So as an example, I have all of these single value visualizations. And what I could do is, as you can see here, I have, you know, for rack 1 in row A, I have a data source for it. Sorry, don't mean to keep scrolling. And I have a data source for all of these. So that means that I have 15 individual data sources for all these visualizations. But what I can also do is I created this server temps data source. If we take a look at it, of course, I'm using just dummy data, but what I've done is this data source is actually returning to me 5 KPIs for 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A. And so what I can do is, for example, if I come here, let me remove this, I can attach that server temps data source, and then I can select the field that I want to be displayed in this single value. So same thing, I could come to this one and I would just set it to 3A, come to this one, set it to 4A, set it to this one 5A, and that would mean I have 5 visualizations that are all using just one search. The other thing that we've done, so just to show you, is now if you want to create a chain search, there's just a quick link to do so. Whoops, sorry. Got a little click happy. Create a chain search, select the parent search. So the parent search can either be an inline search, a saved search, or another chain search. Since I don't have any other chain searches right now, you'll see it's not showing up here, but you know, if I were to add this here, it'll show you what the SPL is for the parent search that you've selected, and then you just continue on with whatever the SPL is that you want to extend that. And then it behaves just like any other search where you just attach it to whatever visualization you want. One of the other things that I wanted to show as part of this demo is I talked earlier about kind of more advanced visualization, like conditional coloring options. So I want to show that first here with this single value. If you, in the configuration panel, when you come towards the bottom, there's a section called coloring. And what this will allow you to do is select which components of this single value you want to color. So it could be the major value, the trend, both, or the background. So you can select your options here. And once you do so, so let's say, you know, to be in line with the rest of these, I'm going to color the background. you can then, we provide a bunch of color palettes out of the box. So you'll see here, we've actually provided for you a bunch of color palettes already here. And then as you add more ranges or remove ranges, you know, it'll adjust to, it'll adjust how many ranges you have and automatically apply colors, but you can always override that if you have specific colors you want. You just replace this hex code with whatever color you want to use. And let's see what else. We have 2 palettes. So basically think about it like if you're in dark mode, oops, didn't mean to do that. If you're in dark mode, you're going to want to use light colors for higher contrast. If you're in light mode, you're going to want darker colors for higher contrast. What else? Same thing applies here for like table visualization. So if I want to format this temperature column, I would just say temperature, come here and edit, and then similar. So like maybe we'll do text this time. I have these different color palettes and options to, you know, color this visualization. And so now you can see these are all colored. For every visualization input and data source, if you come to the very bottom of its configuration panel, you'll see there's a little code drawer, which when you open it will provide you the source code for just that object that you're looking at. So if you ever wanted to make a quick adjustment, you didn't want to go to the full source and have to find it somewhere in that full source view, you can come here and adjust the source code here. And then looking at, so then we'll actually jump into looking at the full source view in just a moment, and I will describe to you kind of the way that it's structured, and then we'll look at the defaults, the default section and how that works. And so what we're going to do is I want to have all of these, actually, let me clear this formatting before we go into that. Okay, I want all of these visualizations here to align to this legend that I have, but I don't want to go through every single one individually and have to actually set it up with the right colors and thresholds for each one individually. So what I've done is I've set it up here on this first one, and then I'll show you how to take that and add it to the default section. And when we come back, you'll see that the rest of them are updated with this coloring. So to enter the source view, it's this little icon here. And the way that it's structured, so as I mentioned, it's JSON. There are 5 top level stanzas: inputs, layout, data sources, defaults, and visualizations. So as you can imagine, in data sources, for example, this is where I have, you know, for the search that I created for server row C rack 4, it is an inline search. This is the query that I've used, and this is the name that displays in the UI. We can set other options here, like if I wanted a specific time range or a specific refresh rate, this is where I would set this option here. Then I have in visualizations. So this is where you would see for each given visualization, the visualization type. And then here is where we would say, okay, if I want this visualization to be powered by a given data source, I would actually specify it here. So that's how you can see we're kind of referencing the data sources that we've defined here. And then this is also where you will be able to set, you know, options on that visualization. So for example, for this is a single value that's one of the KPIs that was at the very top of the page. I can set things like, okay, I want to show the sparkline area graph. I want to specify a font size. So, you know, just all the options that we set here. Inputs, so same thing. So this input type is a time range picker. This is the name of the token that I'm using. This is the default value that I want, and this is the title I want displayed in the UI. And then all of those things will be present in the layout, which has 2 main sections. The first being global inputs. So basically this references all the inputs that you actually want them to show up in the UI, and the order that they're listed here is the order that they're available from left to right. And today we only support global input, so we don't yet support inputs in panels, so only at the top of the canvas. And then the other major section in layouts is structure. And so this is where a visualization actually needs a code block here for it to actually show up on the dashboard. So what it does is it references the ID, the visualization ID, and then the positioning and the height and width for it too. So if your visualization is not here in this structure section, it will not show up in the UI. Same thing for inputs. If it's not here, it's not going to show up in the UI. Okay, and then the last section is defaults. And so I just want to give some starting examples, and then we'll take a look at applying that color thresholding that we were just looking at here. So as you can see, I have two sections here, one for visualizations and one for data sources. By default, all data sources, and how we know it's all is because it says global, we'll use these query parameters. And as you can see, these are the tokens that are coming from the global time range picker. So by default, any data source that you add to this dashboard, if it doesn't have its own time range specified, it's going to adhere to the global time range picker. So you don't need to go through. So if you recall from Simplexml, right, you need to go to each panel and say, I want this to use this time range picker, and then you need to click through, click through, click through. And so no more, you can set it all here in defaults. Similar with visualizations. One of the global settings I have is I don't want to show the last updated time on any of my visualizations. So as a global setting, I set that to false. So now let's take a look at how we would add a new visualizations defaults. And again, this is one of the things that in the future we plan to add UI for, so you don't have to do it in source. But let's expand visualizations here, and then let me find 1A. Okay. So in this visualization, so this is the one that has the background color set up. So as you can see under options, I have background colors specified, which it's coloring the major value, or based on the major value, it's coloring the background color using range values, which are specified here. So these are the three ranges and colors we have specified. So what I'm going to do now is actually take this section. I'm going to cut from here. Go back to defaults. Defaults. Here we go. I'm going to add a new stanza that says, hey, I'm adding a new default, and I only want it to apply to single values. Select that single value. And then I will paste it here. And now when we go back to the canvas, all of these visualizations have now been updated with the same background color dynamic thresholding, but you'll notice that these single values have not. And the reason that this is happening is because on these single values, which we can see here, like I've actually specified that, no, I want this to have a transparent background. And so because I've specified something for this particular visualization, it's not going to adhere to whatever the global defaults are. So that's what I was mentioning earlier, that more local settings will always override the default options. With that, let me pause and see if there are any questions based on the things that I've shown so far, or if there's anything else that you'd like to see.
That's very cool. The question I have is, so the post-process searches, right? In original dashboarding, generally, there's limitations to that, like the number of results and things like that. Is that inherited here, or is that different here? Okay. Fortunately,
it's inherited. It's we are using the same backend mechanisms that are used in Simplexml.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
This is 8.3.
This is 8.2.
As in it's already there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on 8.2.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just looking to see that the .conf has a Splunk University session on this.
Yeah, our education team is working on releasing new course modules that will focus on Dashboard Studio. We are definitely planning on some sessions at Conf that will focus on Dashboard Studio. And then one of the things I'm working on currently is also to provide a kind of tutorial workshop, kind of something that you can self-pace and go through to learn all the basics of. It's actually going through this dashboard and building this dashboard from scratch. So a couple of different
Nice.
resources that we're working on to make it easier to learn it and get up to speed. One of the other things that I want to mention is if you've used the beta app, you'll know that when you're creating visualizations and you're looking at the source code, excuse me, that the type is viz dot whatever visualization type. We are actually slowly replacing all of these visualizations with ones that start with Splunk dot. So as you saw with like single values, for example, it starts with Splunk dot single value. And that's where we're adding all of this capability to have these much more dynamic options that give you a lot more flexibility with the visualization. So we're really just making it a lot more powerful by moving it to this new paradigm. And so when the time comes, if you need to make any updates, I'll just show you how easy it is. So first, let me turn this back into a viz.single value. It's as easy as either going to the source, like I just showed you, just changing from viz to Splunk dot, or otherwise in the UI, you'll have an option here to just go from, it'll only display this if it's actually one of the older visualizations, and then you just select the new one and it'll update accordingly. So today we have single values, single value icons, tables, and choropleth SVGs, which are on this new paradigm. The ones that are coming next, so not in the 8.2 release, but will be in the next release, will be line, column, bar, and area. So very similar situation where, today this area chart is viz.area, and you'll be able to update it to splunk.area. That's one thing to keep in mind. And let me see. Any other questions? Maybe it'll jog some other things for me to mention.
Like actually so the deprecated shows it to you here in the drop down. If you're looking at individual control, is there any way to kind of say, okay, what's all the deprecated stuff on this dashboard?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for the time being, even though it says deprecated, it's still supported. And so what our plan is once we've updated all the visualizations, we'll provide some kind of migration that'll just automatically do it for the entire dashboard. That way, it's not like every release, we're updating just a couple at a time.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's still totally functional and supported.
So will visualization apps have to be upgraded to support 8.2 dashboarding then?
Great question. So if you're using like the Splunk base, like custom visualizations from Splunk base, currently those are not supported yet in Studio. And so that's something that we're looking at how we will support custom visualizations within this new dashboard framework. They still totally work for Simplexml dashboards. We just haven't figured out yet how we want to structure it for the new framework. And for the more immediate term, we're focused on still closing some gaps with the out of the box experience. So I know Manny asked a question about like tokens support. So that's an example of things where it's widely available in Simplexml, but not yet in Studio. And so we're working on closing those gaps first.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions or anything you'd like to see?
I'm curious, are there any, compared to the Simplexml, and I think I know the answer to this, but do you find the performance is about the same? If I was to have the same dashboard, are there any built-in performance improvements, with this, or is this I know this is primarily just visualization, but I don't know if there's something that was built in to make these faster than the Simplexml ones.
Yeah, that's a great question. Not necessarily automatically built in, but there are some things that you can do that will help with the performance of the dashboard. Primarily, again, talking about some of the data sources and the fact that you can have one data source power multiple visualizations. So there's no need for, so like, for example, if I had, let's imagine that this line chart and this table actually had the same search powering both of them. In Simplexml, each of these actually require their own search tied to it, which means you're executing 2 searches to power these 2 visualizations. But in Studio, you can have just one search, the same search that is needed for both, to power both. And so you're only executing one search for multiple visualizations. And then also with the UI improvements to be able to create chain searches from the UI, so that again, if you have a bunch of visualizations where the first part of the search is similar, you can have just one base search executed, and then for the whatever different configurations you need for the different visualizations, you can add a chain search that just does that last bit of formatting on the data for that particular visualization. And again, that means it's only executing that one main base search and then doing post-processing on those results as part of the chain search. So while it doesn't necessarily like happen automatically, we've tried to make it a lot easier to leverage things like that to help with the performance of the dashboard.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm really excited about this. I think it's it allows Splunk to compete with Tableau and Power BI and other other dashboarding apps out of the box tools, while still maintaining Splunk's ability to work with big data. And I think this demo was really awesome. My own the rest of my team didn't tune in, and I was just hoping that you might be able to provide PowerPoint slides or that information. I wish they'd been able to see the actual demo, but if you have any information, is it possible that you might be able to disseminate it?
Ed, if I can jump in, we do record these, as you can see, and they end up on the Splunk community YouTube channel.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
So yes, if you get onto the community Slack into the Boston channel, that's where I post them, unless you're already subscribed.
Oh, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
That reminded me of one other thing I would love to show. We've also integrated into search. So let's say I come to search and I set up something here. I can save it now. When I save it, it'll save to, you can save it to both Simplexml or Studio dashboards. You'll notice one change we've made is we've kind of split out new or existing. The reason for that is, of course, now we actually have to be able to have this selector between the two. But one improvement we also made as part of this to when you want to add to an existing dashboard is you can actually browse and search now for your dashboards. If you've ever seen it before, it was just a drop down, which was terrible. So anyways, so you can come here now and I can look for data center sensors and it'll show me all the results that I have.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we're coming down to our last few minutes here.
So I have a question. Me as a developer, I think I'm lacking some documentation. Are you guys planning to put more documentation, especially like writing like JavaScript code, or more things that are out of the box? Can you guys provide reference like the objects available, the methods and all of that?
Yeah, it sounds like you're asking kind of for like a JSON specification documentation. Did I understand that correctly?
It's not really JSON. It's more like, let's say I'm looking for, okay, right now, if I go over the JSON and the documentation, I want to see the objects available for one particular JSON object. I'm not able to see all the properties and all of that. So that's one thing, be able to, in the documentation, to be able to figure out what are the documents, the properties available for the objects. And the second thing is in the developer website, I don't see any mentioning about this new framework that you guys have. Is that a JavaScript framework, or what are you guys using in the background for this?
Yes, that's a great question. So first for the user documentation, let me just, there should be references when you come here. So there's an object options reference for every visualization. It should have all the different options that are available to you. And then with data sources, same thing. There should be there should be a chart that has all of the options that are available to you for each of those. We definitely, we are more than happy to make improvements to the documentation. And so if you're able to, just submit feedback as you have been doing of things that you'd like to see that you feel are missing, we can definitely add those. And then specific to, for the user docs, and then specific to developer documentation, that is something that is kind of in the works. So we're still figuring out the best way to provide guidance on how to use the underlying framework itself. So that, in the case that you want to build like a custom app that uses that framework and you want to build your own custom components within the dashboarding framework. So just the amount of effort that it requires for us to do that is why we don't have it up yet, as we've been focusing on the out of the box experience so far, but it is planned for us to have developer documentation. But your observation is correct that we currently don't have that. Any last questions?
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was very engaging and interactive and really cool stuff to see. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have any feedback, you can send it to dashboard-studio@splunk.com. Myself and the entire dashboards team watches that, and we try to turn around results in or answers, within 1 to 2 business days. We also have the Splunk Ideas portal, which again, highly recommend that you put requests in there too, because we do actually triage those and prioritize those requests. And then of course, in Slack, the user groups, I'm in the dashboards channel.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.